Nietzsche did not fight depression with the language of doctors. He wrote as if his soul were on fire. He didn't describe pain as a symptom, but as a sacred initiation. While he whispered, "God is dead," the world mistook him for a rebel. But in truth, he was grieving, mourning the collapse of old meanings that nothing new had yet replaced. And this too lies at the heart of what Carl Jung later called the dark night of the soul, the moment when the old structures of the ego collapse, forcing us to confront the darkness within. In this video, we will not try to heal depression in the conventional sense. Instead, we will understand it as a transformative journey, a sacred calling inviting you to step into the ruins of your own being, not to die, but to be reborn. Stay with me, not to be healed, but to be transformed. This is not a journey out of the darkness, but a lesson in how to walk with it. Because you are not only the light you aspire to be, you are also the totality of the light and shadow you dare to face. Depression is not the end of the road. It's the knock on the door. In modern culture, depression is often seen as a system error, something wrong that needs to be fixed. But what if we change the lens? What if depression isn't a malfunction, but a summons, a calling from a forgotten part of the soul trying to find its way back home? Friedrich Nietzsche, amid physical and spiritual torment, did not try to escape the darkness. He walked into it. He wasn't trying to feel better. He was trying to understand, where does this pain come from? What does it want from me? Carl Jung later described this state as a crisis of meaning. It's not that you're sad for no reason. It's not that your brain chemicals are randomly out of balance. It's the story you believed about your life is decaying. What used to get you out of bed in the morning now feels empty. You feel lost, not because you're weak, but because meaning has died and the new has not yet been born. Existential crisis, the invisible hunger. Nietzsche called this nihilism, not the rejection of morals, but the deep sense that nothing matters anymore. It's the death of God, not in a religious sense, but as the collapse of the central symbols that once gave your life shape. From a Jungian view, this is the moment the ego is stripped bare. The things that once defined you, career, relationships, identity, now feel hollow. And as the ego collapses, the darkness enters. But Jung emphasized the darkness is not the enemy. It is a repressed part of your soul. It carries a message your conscious mind has refused to hear. And in every episode of depression, that message whispers, something within you is trying to be born. But it can only emerge after the old has fallen apart. The untold story, when the soul calls you home. Modern Westerners are caught in a linear script: live, achieve, be happy. But both Nietzsche and Jung saw life as cyclical, like the ancient rites of passage: departure, descent, rebirth. Nietzsche, though he never used therapeutic language, was living what Jung would later call the descent into the underworld. In Greek myths, this is where the hero meets their greatest darkness, only to return with sacred fire. And in reality, many people experiencing depression are walking a modern version of that journey. When you lose a job, you don't just lose income, you lose meaning. When a relationship ends, it's not just the person you lose, it's the story you once believed about yourself. When you sit in the dark, numb to everything that once brought you joy, that's the soul waiting for you to return. Depression isn't the absence of emotion, it's the cry that's been silenced for far too long. When the old self dies, the true self begins. Jung believed depression is a calling from the self, the deeper center of your being, beyond ego and social identity. When the old self falls apart, pain arises not because you're broken, but because a soul structure has outlived its time. And that pain is the pressure preparing something new to be born, like a cocoon dissolving so the butterfly can emerge. There's nothing wrong with the cocoon; it once served a purpose. But if you stay in it forever, you'll suffocate. In his utter solitude, Nietzsche wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star." And Jung interpreted this to mean only when we face the darkness within can true light emerge. Healing together, the mirror of community. In the process of moving through depression, community plays a vital role. Jung wrote, "Individuation doesn't mean isolation, but integration with others as mirrors of the self. Sharing your experience, hearing other stories helps you realize you are not alone. Your pain is not abnormal. You are part of the human journey where every soul must walk through its dark forest to rediscover its unique light." Jung also suggested working with symbols, dreams, images, acts of creation. What we often call art is actually the language of the soul. When words no longer work, images begin to speak. Let me ask you this. If your current pain was a messenger, what message would it be trying to deliver? When the old story no longer fits, are you willing to write a new one? Comment below if you've ever gone through a loss of meaning and how you found your way through. Together, we're rewriting the story of depression not as a disease, but as a sacred rite of rebirth. In the spiritual darkness Nietzsche called nihilism, he did not fall into silence. On the contrary, he let his trembling hand write, not to explain, but to keep his soul from dissolving. Amidst physical pain and absolute isolation, he found three tools, like guiding stars for those lost in the night. 1. Amor fati, love your fate. Nietzsche's famous line, "My formula for greatness is amor fati," that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. Amor fati is not passive acceptance. It is an active response to fate, a wholehearted yes to life in its totality, including loss, failure, and seemingly meaningless nights. In Jungian therapy, this mirrors the phase of embracing the shadow. It's the moment when you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" A new doorway opens. As someone betrayed might live in bitterness forever, but if she touches Amor Fati, she may look back and say, "That wound pushed me to find myself." Nietzsche didn't say suffering is good. He said it's inseparable from being. Jung agreed, "What we do not confront in the unconscious will appear in our life as fate, and when we love that fate, we are no longer its victim." 2. Become who you are. We live in a world of roles: the good child, the ideal employee, the perfect partner, the winner. But Nietzsche asks, are you living your life or just playing a role? He wrote, "Become who you are." A strange paradox. How do we become what we already are? The answer lies in what Jung called individuation, the journey to become your authentic self, beyond social identities, toward your unique soul. Ironically, depression is often the first sign that you've wandered too far from who you truly are. The numbness, the sadness, the disorientation, these are not a disorder, but a warning bell from the self. You are living a life that is no longer true. Imagine a woman who spends her whole life being the perfect daughter, always obedient, always kind, always selfless. One day she breaks down. She can't understand why life feels so empty. Nietzsche says, that's the moment you must break the role and begin rewriting your own story. Jung would call it breaking the persona. Becoming yourself isn't about being cooler. It's about letting go of what you're not, even if it once kept you alive. 3. Will to power. The drive to evolve, not dominate. Will to power is often misunderstood as a lust for domination. But for Nietzsche, it was the primal energy to live, to create, to surpass oneself. Not all of us want to rule the world, but every soul carries a quiet dream to become itself fully. Will to power is the voice in you that keeps walking when you're exhausted, that rises again when you want to quit, that chooses honesty over pretending you're okay. In Jung's language, this is the creative life force of the self beyond ego, a spiritual energy that longs to take form. Will to power doesn't have to be grand. Sometimes it's simply the act of writing your pain. Nietzsche said to give style to one's character. A great and rare art, Jung called it, the inner work, not to be perfect, but to be shaped and whole. Together, these three principles form a soul triangle. Amor fati gives you courage to live with suffering. Become who you are gives you identity amidst chaos. Will to power gives you the vitality to go on and create something new. If you're at the bottom of the valley, unsure where to begin, start with acceptance. Not surrender, but I will no longer fight what is happening. Then ask, what part of me has never been allowed to speak? And finally, what is my soul trying to give birth to through this crack? Wikider, comment below, which of these three principles do you feel you need most right now? Or if you've lived through one of them, what did it teach you? Open any social media app and happiness gleams through perfectly filtered photos, serene mornings with coffee and gentle sunlight, captions like good vibes only that feel soft, yet somehow forceful. We live in a culture so afraid of darkness that we do everything to deny its existence. So when you don't feel okay, when you're not smiling, when you don't feel grateful, you start to believe there's something wrong with you. Nietzsche called this spiritual sedation, a kind of soul-numbing hidden beneath pretty words. Jung called it shadow bypassing, using artificial light to cover wounds that haven't yet healed. When happiness becomes a cage, Nietzsche wasn't interested in cheap joy. He was interested in what's real, even when it hurts. In The Gay Science, he wrote that most people use happiness to avoid confronting life's bigger questions. Who am I when I have nothing left to be proud of? And when they lose their outer identities, they fall into nihilism, not because they are weak, but because no one ever taught them pain is a valid part of life. Jung echoes the goal of life is not happiness. The goal is wholeness. Wholeness includes tears, failure, envy, fear, all the parts we push into the shadow. When we try too hard to be cheerful, we abandon our own soul. The spirit of gravity, when sadness weighs on the soul. Nietzsche said that within each of us is an invisible force pulling us down, the spirit of gravity. It's the voice that whispers, don't dream, don't believe in depth, stay where it's safe. In therapy, we call it the inner critic. Jung saw it as the inner resistance that emerges on the path of individuation. Every time you try to be authentic, to speak your truth, to choose a different path than what society expects, that spiritual gravity appears to hold you back. Nietzsche didn't teach us to destroy it. He taught us to dance with it. He used the image of a tightrope walker, a brilliant metaphor for the delicate balance between falling and flying. This is the truest existential state. You don't avoid darkness, but you don't drown in it either. Enduring is not weakness. It's the threshold of transformation. Nietzsche wrote, to live is to suffer, to survive is to find meaning in the suffering. This doesn't mean just endure and you'll become better. It means pain is the soil where meaning is born if you're willing to stay present with it. Imagine someone grieving a lost loved one. The pain is real. Nothing numbs it. But if they sit with that pain without judgment, without escape, they might begin to hear something deeper, that love isn't gone. It needs to live on through me. Jung would call this symbolic living, when you no longer live by outer events alone, but by the inner symbolic depth they carry. Let go of positive thinking. Step into conscious suffering. One of modern society's great illusions is if you think positively enough, you'll escape all hardship. Nietzsche and Jung both rejected that. Nietzsche said truth always includes chaos. A healthy mind isn't one that avoids paradox, but one that can hold it. Jung added, only when you allow the darkness to exist can the light truly enter. Healing doesn't come from feeling better, it comes from becoming more whole. Imagine this: one day a metaphysical being appears before you and says, you will live this life again, every detail, every breath, forever. Nothing will change. Everything that has happened will happen again, and there is no escape. Can you accept that? This question, strange as it may sound, is at the very heart of Nietzsche's philosophy. It's not just a thought experiment, it's a soul-shaking spiritual rite. He called it eternal recurrence, when time is no longer linear. In our modern world, we live as if everything is moving forward, but eternal recurrence flips that illusion. If nothing new ever came, could you still say yes to your life? This isn't about fate. It doesn't mean you will live again. It's asking, are you living this life as sacred, or just treating it like a rough draft? Carl Jung saw eternal recurrence as an archetypal pattern and inner cycle. When you refuse to learn a soul lesson, it returns, not because the universe is punishing you, but because your soul isn't yet whole. A soul trial: could you relive this life? This is not a comfortable question. It exposes the gray areas you'd rather not face. How much of your life is truly your choice? How many meaningless days have you let slip by waiting for life to go back to normal? Are you loving, creating, living, or just surviving behind a screen? Eternal recurrence calls you back to existential presence, living each moment fully as if it's the first and last time. In psychotherapy, this mirrors the shift from emotional avoidance to fully embodied experience, being present with every feeling, every decision, every breath. Real-life example: when wounds repeat. Imagine someone who keeps ending up in emotionally abusive relationships. The faces change, but the pattern repeats. Jung would say, that's an unintegrated shadow, a part of the soul crying out to be seen. Eternal recurrence isn't just an abstract idea. It shows up as recurring dreams, emotional déjà vu, lessons unfinished. When you live unconsciously, you repeat patterns. But when you live with awareness, each cycle becomes a deeper spiral of awakening. From why is this happening to me to how would I live if this were forever? Here's where Nietzsche and Jung meet. Both believed in suffering. The true soul begins to speak. You don't need all the answers. You just need one thing: the courage to live as if what you do today will echo forever. If today you fight with someone you love, would you want to relive it? If today you work out of fear instead of passion, could you keep doing it forever? If today you say no to your dream, are you willing to replay that refusal eternally? Reshape your life, redefine meaning. When you embrace eternal recurrence as a life principle, something shifts. You stop postponing what truly matters. No more someday. Every moment becomes sacred. You become radically honest. No more pretending. No more pleasing others at the cost of your soul. You make beauty out of pain. If life must repeat, let it be filled with symbols, with meaning. You start to write paint, create love with eternal awareness. Imagine you're living a single day and it will repeat forever. Would you live it differently? And if yes, what is stopping you from living like that today? Perhaps the strangest thing you'll discover after walking through all that darkness is not that you've changed, but that you've returned to yourself. You are no longer the one running from pain. You are the one who knows how to sit with it, breathe through it, and listen to what your soul has always whispered. This pain didn't come to destroy me. It came to give birth to me. Nietzsche named the abyss. Jung lit a torch within it, and now the rest belongs to you. You don't need to be okay. You need to be real. In a world racing toward false happiness, your decision to pause and feel is a radical act. Every bout of depression isn't a system failure. It's a soul's call for something more real. Every time you ask, what is the meaning of this life? It's not a crisis. It's an invitation into depth. And every time you feel like you're falling, maybe it's the first time you're falling out of illusions that no longer fit. The real journey begins after this video. You could turn off the screen, go back to work, re-enter the loop. But if something inside you is awakening, don't turn away. Rewrite your story. Ask what in your life is truly yours. Look at the shadow you've avoided. And most of all, don't walk this path alone. Jung once said, the path to the self cannot be walked alone. We need community. We need sacred spaces to ask uncomfortable questions, not for ready-made answers, but to hear our deeper truth. Now it's your turn. Tell me, what part of this video made you pause a little longer? Was there a line that felt like it spoke the words your soul hadn't found yet? Or maybe, what inside you still remains unnamed? Leave a comment below, not as a technical gesture, but as a small ritual offering your truth to connect with the truth in others. If this video resonated with you, don't just watch. Subscribe to the channel so you won't miss future deep conversations like this. Every video is a breath for the soul, not to entertain, but to remind you of the parts you're forgetting. Share this video with someone in the dark, not to rescue them, but to let them know they are not alone. You are not here to chase the light. You are here to become the light that knows its own shadow. And when you begin to live as if this life will repeat forever, that's when you're truly alive.